Dr. Phil stopped the cameras dedigen kimstamen edemesdi, bu sift hick Evelyn memesti. The studio lights were blazing, the audience settled into their seats, and Dr. Phil McGraw stood center stage with that signature look of controlled authority. But in the next 60 seconds, something would happen that even the most seasoned producers didn't see coming. The cameras would stop rolling. The teleprompter would go dark. And a couple who thought they'd been married for 22 years would discover a truth that would shatter everything they believed about their life together. This is the story of how one envelope, one question, and one moment of brutal honesty turned a routine taping into one of the most unforgettable episodes in Dr. Phil history. Sarah and Michael Chen walked onto the Dr. Phil stage like countless couples before them. Married for over 2 decades, parents to 3 children, they appeared to be the picture of suburban stability. But beneath the surface, cracks had formed. Financial struggles. Communication breakdowns. A sense that somewhere along the way, they'd lost each other. "We need help," Sarah had written in her application to the show. "We've been together since college, but lately it feels like we're strangers living under the same roof." The production team thought this would be a straightforward relationship counseling session. Work through some issues, provide some tools, send them home with homework and hope. Standard operating procedure for the Dr. Phil show. But Sarah had included one small detail in her background paperwork that caught a producer's eye. "We got married at a beach ceremony in Mexico during spring break in 2003. It was just the 2 of us and a local officiant." That single sentence triggered something. A phone call was made. Documents were requested. And by the time Sarah and Michael arrived at the Paramount Studios lot in Los Angeles, a manila envelope sat waiting in Dr. Phil's dressing room. The interview began normally enough. Dr. Phil established rapport, asked about their history, let them tell their story. "So you've been married how long?" Dr. Phil asked, settling into his chair across from the couple. 22 years, Michael answered proudly. "Best decision I ever made was marrying this woman." Sarah smiled, but there was sadness in her eyes. "We were so young. So in love. We thought nothing could touch us." Dr. Phil leaned forward. "What changed?" And that's when the floodgates opened. The money problems. Michael's job lost 3 years ago. Sarah's resentment about carrying the financial burden. The way they'd stopped talking, really talking, about anything that mattered. The growing distance that felt insurmountable. The audience listened, rapt. This was familiar territory, a couple in crisis, searching for answers. But Dr. Phil's expression had shifted. He glanced toward the production booth, then back at the couple. His jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Let me ask you something," Dr. Phil said, his tone changing from conversational to laser-focused. "This wedding in Mexico. Tell me exactly what happened that day." Sarah and Michael exchanged a glance, confused by the sudden shift. "It was beautiful," Sarah began. "We were on spring break, and we knew. We found this guy on the beach who said he could marry us. He had credentials, or at least we thought he did. We said our vows at sunset." "And then what?" Dr. Phil pressed. "Then we came home," Michael said. "Told our families. Started our life together." Dr. Phil stood up. The audience stirred, sensing something in his body language. "Did you file paperwork when you got back to the States?" The question hung in the air like a thunderclap. Sarah's face went pale. I thought the officiant handled all that. He said he would file everything with the Mexican government, and that it would be recognized in the U.S. Dr. Phil paused mid-sentence. The studio went completely silent. "Stop the tape," Dr. Phil said, not to the couple, but directly to the control booth. His voice was calm but absolute. "Stop the tape right now." The red recording lights blinked off. Producers scrambled. The audience, trained to stay quiet during tapings, began to murmur. Dr. Phil walked to the edge of the stage, motioning to a production assistant. Words were exchanged. The manila envelope was brought out. When Dr. Phil returned to his seat, his entire demeanor had shifted. This was no longer a television show. This was a moment of reckoning. Sarah. Michael. Dr. Phil placed the envelope on the table between them. Before we go any further, I need you to understand something. My team did some research after reading your application. We reached out to authorities in Mexico, to the U.S. State Department, to legal experts in international marriage law. Subscribe and leave a comment, because the most powerful part of this story is still ahead. Michael's hands began to shake. Sarah grabbed his arm. What we found, Dr. Phil continued, his voice gentle now, almost pastoral, is that the man who performed your ceremony on that beach wasn't a licensed officiant. He had no legal authority to perform marriages. And more importantly, even if he had, you never filed the required paperwork to make that marriage legally binding in the United States. The words landed like physical blows. What are you saying? Sarah whispered. Dr. Phil opened the envelope and pulled out a stack of documents. I'm saying that according to every legal database we've checked, every county clerk's office, every marriage registry in the state of California where you've lived for the past 22 years. He paused, letting the weight settle. You two were never legally married. The studio erupted. Audience members gasped. Sarah's hands flew to her mouth. Michael stood up, then sat back down, his face drained of color. That's impossible, Michael said, his voice cracking. We have a marriage certificate. We filed taxes jointly. We have 3 kids together. You have a piece of paper from a beach in Mexico, Dr. Phil said, not unkindly. But it has no legal standing. And yes, you've been filing taxes jointly, which means you've been filing incorrectly for over 2 decades. Your children are legitimate, that's not in question. But in the eyes of the law, you've been living as domestic partners, not spouses. Off camera, Dr. Phil made a choice no producer expected. He stood again and walked over to the couple. Cameras weren't rolling, but everyone in the studio watched as Dr. Phil knelt beside Sarah's chair, speaking to her in a voice meant only for her and Michael, though the studio mics picked up every word. I know this is devastating, he said. I know this feels like your entire life just got rewritten. But I want you to hear me very carefully. This doesn't change what you've built together. It doesn't invalidate 22 years of partnership, of raising children, of weathering storms. What it does is give you a choice. Sarah was crying now, great heaving sobs. Michael put his arm around her, and she collapsed into his chest. A choice? Michael asked, his own voice thick with emotion. Dr. Phil nodded. You can choose to make it legal. Right here, right now, you can decide if this marriage, this partnership you've built, is something you want to formalize. Or you can acknowledge that maybe this revelation is telling you something you've both been afraid to admit. The studio was utterly silent. Even the crew had stopped moving. Sarah lifted her head from Michael's shoulder. Her mascara had run, her face was blotchy and red, but when she looked at her husband, something shifted. I don't need a piece of paper to know I'm committed to you, she said, her voice stronger than it had been all day. But I need you to fight for us. I need you to show up, not just physically, but emotionally. I need the man I fell in love with on that beach to come back. Michael's eyes welled up. I'm right here, Sarah. I've always been right here. I got lost. I let the shame of losing my job, of not being able to provide, make me pull away from you. But you're everything to me. You and those kids. Paper or no paper, you're my wife. You've always been my wife. But what happened next is something no one in the room, or watching at home, saw coming. Dr. Phil reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card. But this wasn't just any card, it was thick, embossed, with gold lettering. This, Dr. Phil said, holding it up so both Sarah and Michael could see, is the card of a family law attorney I trust. Someone who specializes in situations exactly like yours. Here's what's going to happen. My team is going to cover the legal fees to get your marriage properly registered and recognized. We're going to fix the tax situation. We're going to make sure that legally, you're protected, both of you and your children. Sarah looked up stunned. You're You're going to help us? That's what we do here, Dr. Phil said simply. But there's a condition. You two are going to commit, right here, right now, to 12 weeks of intensive couples therapy. Not just any therapy. I'm talking about the real work. The hard conversations. The stuff that makes you uncomfortable. Because here's the truth, you don't have a marriage problem. You have a communication problem. And if we don't fix that, no piece of paper is going to save you. Michael stood up and extended his hand to Dr. Phil. We'll do it. Whatever it takes. Dr. Phil shook his hand, then turned to the production booth. Cameras back on. Let's finish this. The red lights blinked back to life. What happened in the remaining minutes of that taping became the stuff of Dr. Phil legend. Sarah and Michael, still reeling from the revelation, sat down with Dr. Phil and mapped out a plan. Not just for legalizing their marriage, but for rebuilding it from the ground up. Dr. Phil brought out Dr. Charles Sophie, a psychiatrist who had worked with the show for years, to talk through the psychological impact of discovering your entire marital foundation was built on a misunderstanding. This is trauma, Dr. Sophie explained to the couple and the audience. Your brains have to reconcile 22 years of identity with this new information. It's disorienting. It's scary. But it's also an opportunity. How many couples get to literally choose their marriage again? How many get a do-over? The audience, which had been shocked into silence earlier, began to nod. Some were crying. Others were leaning forward, completely absorbed. Dr. Phil walked to center stage, addressing the camera directly. If you're watching this at home and you're thinking about your own relationship, I want you to ask yourself something. Are you legally married, or are you just going through the motions? Because here's what I know. It doesn't matter what a piece of paper says if you're not showing up for each other every single day. Sarah and Michael didn't have a legal marriage, but they had something more important. They had commitment. They had history. They had love, even when it was buried under resentment and hurt. He turned back to the couple. The question is, what are you going to do with this second chance? Sarah reached over and took Michael's hand. We're going to do it right this time. All of it. The audience erupted in applause. People stood, some with tears streaming down their faces. This wasn't just a couple getting help. This was a testament to the resilience of human connection. Share and subscribe. Make sure this story is never forgotten. 6 weeks after the taping, Dr. Phil's producers followed up with Sarah and Michael. They'd begun therapy as promised. They'd filed the correct paperwork to legalize their marriage, a small ceremony at a courthouse with their 3 children present. And more importantly, they were talking. Really talking. It's like we're dating again, Sarah told the producer over the phone. We're learning each other all over again. And this time, we're not kids who think love is enough. We're adults who know that love is a choice you make every single day. Michael had gotten a new job. Not the high-paying position he'd lost, but something stable. Something that gave him back his sense of purpose. And Sarah had started setting boundaries around her own needs, refusing to carry the emotional weight of the relationship alone. Dr. Phil saved our marriage, Michael said. But more than that, he gave us permission to be honest. About everything. And that honesty is what's keeping us together now. When the episode finally aired 3 months later, it became one of the most watched in the show's history. Social media exploded with reactions. Legal experts weighed in on the complexities of international marriages. Relationship counselors used it as a teaching tool. But for Dr. Phil, it was just another day at the office. Another couple helped. Another life changed. In his closing remarks during the taping, he'd said something that stuck with everyone in that studio. Marriage isn't about a certificate on a wall. It's about 2 people waking up every morning and choosing each other. Sarah and Michael didn't have the paper, but they had the commitment. And now they have both. That's what we call a win. The manila envelope that started it all, the one containing the legal research, the documentation, the proof of an unlived legal marriage, sits in the show's archives now. A reminder that sometimes the most powerful revelations come not from what we know, but from what we discover we never knew at all. For Sarah and Michael Chen, that discovery became the catalyst for the most important decision of their lives. To choose each other, not because a piece of paper said they had to, but because their hearts demanded it. And in the end, that choice made all the difference.